another F100 video. We've been working on this thing and kind of just getting a lot of the previous stuff that we talked about in the first video done. Kind of just buttoning up all the suspension and steering, taking care of little details that were from before that we just wanted to take care of. I didn't want to spend too much time boring you guys with like adding grease fittings and cotter pins and just tightening up stuff. That's not really interesting. So today's video, we're going to go over a lot of the parts that we got that came in for the Ranger. And it's a lot. We got a ton of stuff from Fat Fender Garage. Solomon helped us out with getting that and kind of picking that stuff. And we called Quick Performance, since that's where the Ford 9-inch is from, that guy. So gave them a call. They helped us out sourcing the calipers we needed for the back. So black to match the front ones that the customer already had, brake pads, brackets, hardware, all that good stuff. So nothing crazy going on there. This is where a lot of the cool stuff is. So honestly, it's a lot of stuff, so we're gonna look at it together. But I know that we did get the hood hinges. Since the truck does not have that, customer opted to get these in basically a satin black powder coat. So super clean. We're excited to put those on. And then we got a bunch of fuel line for the fuel system. We went with the return setup just because that's going to be a lot easier for this truck. So a bunch of fuel there. All the fittings we're going to need. This is an adapter for the radiator so we could fit a same hose. We got the Fat Fender Garage pedal assembly for the drive-by-wire pedal. So that'll make the swap a lot easier. This is a Fat Fender Garage remote filter kit, so we got that. More oil filter relocation stuff, super clean. Get that thrown back in there. We got a giant trans cooler. We actually run the same brand. Actually, it's probably the same exact cooler. We have this one in the white Jeep right there. So that one, it's cooling our transmission and our power steering, and it does really good. Should do more than what we need for this truck. Aeromotive. Always recommend them for all our fuel needs. Various tabs and brackets. I believe this is all for the shifter stuff. We're going to keep the 3 in the tree shifter setup. So this is going to make that a lot easier. So all this is related to that. Fuel pressure regulator, since we're going to be returning the fuel back into the fuel cell. Aeromotive as always. Bunch of other fittings. This is probably going to be for the tranny cooler. I believe this is a little filter. Yeah, it's a little filter there for the fuel system. We have the Willwood Master and the booster here, which I'm going to open that up and show you guys now. This is the more parts for the gear shift sender. Little stuff there. These are actually for the hood struts. So hood struts for the hood, 4 of them. It's going to throw that thing up super easily. Very nice. I see some stuff hiding back here. This is all more the shifter assembly stuff. I believe this is our brake booster. We'll get that opened up. Yep, so brake booster, which this is going to be super important because with the Coyote in there and with how slammed this truck is, the motor had to come up. So you're not going to fit a big brake booster, so that's what's going to fit. So in here, obviously, black Willwood master cylinder, keep everything super clean. Customer wanted to keep as much stuff black as possible, and then we have the proportioning valve so we could adjust how much the rear brakes are getting. And it looks like there's wires there, so we might have a little brake switch, so that'll be super clean. More fittings there. So yeah, ton of Fat Fender Garage parts. We're actually still waiting on the radiator for the truck, which that should be coming in soon. And then we also got some of the laser cut parts that we were talking about that we wanted to make for the motor mounts and the bed support, all that good stuff. We got these brackets from Laser. So basically we made these things out of chipboard. This is going to be to double shear the lower control arm mounts that we were talking about in the first video. So basically we're going to add a bend in this, and then that'll get bent 90 degrees, welded onto the frame, and then we have these gussets that we made that'll basically go on top and tie it all together. So that should look pretty clean. And then these are basically our motor mount gusset plates, I guess you could call them, that we made. So the motor mounts, if you guys remember from the first videos, just 2 tabs coming out. So this is going to be to box it all in together. And then if you notice, this one looks a little bit different than that one. It's going to be to clear the steering shaft. So you'll see that once we get it put on. And then this will just help box it in and make it look nicer. Also got the bed support back. We got that laser cut as well. So instead of the 2 tabs that we had that were, it was just basically like, it's actually those right there. So instead of those guys being here and here, we decided to put a longer piece, and then we'll add more holes. And just already with those 2 bolts, it already like minimized how much this thing was like flexing back. So that was a win there. We're gonna try to get that a little bit better because I really don't like how this has this much play there. So we're gonna see if we have enough material to kind of like put that down. But even if we don't, it's distributing that load over that whole piece, so it's gonna work a lot better than what it was before. So that's pretty cool. All right, so truck is up on the lift, and we can show you guys some of the stuff that we got done already. All right, so it's a lot better. So in the first video, we talked about how a lot of this stuff was missing grease fittings and cotter pins, and that's what I was talking about that I didn't want to bore you guys with in the beginning. But basically, this stuff is all buttoned up now. I think we got everything dressed up with hardware that needed it, and it is where it should be. I think the last thing that we're waiting on is to get steering rack bushings for this guy right here. Those are like tearing apart. Not sure why or how, but it's probably from age and sitting, but we're just gonna get them replaced. But everything else on the front end, as far as steering and suspension, is ready to go. We also finished welding up some stuff that we mentioned in the first video. So some of these guys, so this was fully welded, but these were not fully welded. So we welded those up. Those are good to go now, both sides and the top. Looks super good. And then this, we mentioned it being completely open. So we made a cap for that. Looks super good. Clean that up and just kind of finishes the look of the truck under here. Not that anyone's gonna be under here often, but adds a little bit of more rigidity there. And then you guys might have noticed already that the giant cantilever mount is gone. So that was pretty interesting. So when we took apart the cantilever, I need to figure out how we say that. But when we took that apart, we found a lot of things that we were hoping we didn't find, but it is what it is. So the links were pretty good, but we're gonna end up going with a custom link for this. And we're not a custom link, but we're gonna end up going with the same length link, but out of aluminum, just because the welding is kind of like, I mean, you guys know where we stand on welding, so that's not it. So I ended up getting aluminum ones. The cost of the aluminum link ended up being cheaper than how much it would have cost them to have this redone, so kind of pointless to redo that, and it's cheaper and get a better product. But the biggest issue we found, so this is what was being bolted through the arm itself and holding on to the mount that basically was like the pivot arm. So if you guys remember, we were talking about how this thing had a ton of creaking every time we aired it up or down, and it was basically because there was no bushing, and also these threads were just riding on the inside of that tube, just doing its thing. So that was incorrect. So we went ahead and got rid of all that shit. And then what we're gonna run, which this was kind of expensive, but it's gonna be needed for the car. So with those type of suspension arms over there that we'll talk about, you're supposed to have some sort of bushing. So we're gonna do a bronze oil impregnated bushing, which basically this doesn't need a whole lot of lubrication. It's technically lubricated already. This is gonna slide into a piece of DOM, which we'll show later when we start building this. And then this expensive bolt is going to drop through there, which it should be a perfect fit. So then that bronze bushing is gonna be on the tube, which we're gonna weld the mount to on the car, and then that's basically a machine fit right there. Like, it's as perfect as it could get. And then you'll see that we have a little bit extra here, And the reason being for that is, we'll come over here to the arm itself, which we actually fully redid these things, which I'll show you guys now before we get into that. But here's our bronze bushing, the arm where it mounts to the frame itself. That guy's gonna drop perfectly in there, and that's gonna have a sleeve tube sitting in between there as well. And then this guy is gonna drop through, which this was also another problem. The holes aren't even like perfect. So that was also one of the big issues, but it works from one side and not the other. So we need to open up those holes. Basically, you can see that once it's in there, once that pops through all the way, this shoulder will be just out and it should be perfect. And that's gonna give them a super nice rotating piece right there that's not gonna make any noise, hopefully. So that's our solution to it. I think it's the best way to tackle that. The arms themselves. So if you guys remember in the first video, these things were honestly terribly welded. And I know that multiple people welded on this, but the first person did not do the best job. The second person was just trying to fill these holes on the top side. I don't think he did a bad job, but whatever. But this thing was welded on the inside, which is good. It just helps keep it all together, especially since we grinded all the welding down, which took us about, I think it took about 10 hours from when we took these off, grinded all the welds down, and prepped it to where we wanted it. And then by the time we TIG welded over it and got it to what the customer wanted, it was probably close to like 16 hours. And we still have more work to do on this. I do want to add that overlay that's going to go here. And then we still need to build the mount that goes on the frame. But everything's super cleanly TIG welded, the whole thing. So everything looks really good. It all looks super uniform all the way across. And then we pretty much left the construction of it because it did work, and it was going to be honestly too much money for what it's worth to redo this whole thing completely. So we didn't do that. But basically where we're at now is the arms are done. We're gonna try to make the mounts for the cantilever today and get them on the frame and probably show you guys that. And then hopefully mock it up with the old links until we get the new links, and hopefully get this thing back on all four. Technically, it could roll around right now, but we can't go up or down on the back. So I want to get that to the point that we can, so this is easier to move around the shop again. Yeah, so I'm going to start working on this thing and start figuring out the tubes and measurements and all that stuff that takes honestly a lot longer than all the welding. With these projects, you spend literally like 90% of the time of that project either figuring out what you're going to do, measuring it out, cutting the tubes, fitting it perfectly, prepping it. All that takes way longer than just like the 10 minutes it takes to like weld it up. So all right, we'll get that rolling. Pretty much figured out what I wanted to do for the whole little mount thing. So basically I figured out I'm gonna just press that piece of bronze, which is a 2-inch like section that has an OD of 1.5. So we're gonna press that into an 1 3/4 by 120 wall tubing, which that's already done over there. I'll show you now. And then we're gonna make little pedestals for it that kind of look like that. And then I already know what size that I need it to go up in order to catch the arm itself. So here you can see basically the bushing assembly that I made, which this will get the shoulder bolt inside of it. And this drops pretty nice inside here. So we got that perfectly in there. So then what we're gonna do is, this could get prepped already and ready for welding. And then we're gonna throw this in the notcher, hit it with a 90 so it could catch this guy nicely right there. And then once we get that, we'll put it on the truck and probably mock up this guy with the link and be able to figure out exactly where we need that guy. And then we could take it out, pretty much weld this all together, make it one, and then we'll have it ready on the truck. And then once it's on the truck, we're gonna make these gussets that'll basically go from like here and kind of just support it in different ways. But instead of just doing a flat piece that just went on one edge how they had it before, we're going to try to make it a little bit more three-dimensional, so it adds more support not only this way, but we're going to attempt to get more support this way as well, because that's essentially acting as like the spring of the car. So we're going to get this notched up, figure it out in the truck, and then get it all tacked together. And then that is what we got. So that took about probably like 30-40 minutes. Bronze bushing into the piece of DOM. Our pedestal that's gonna raise that bushing up off the frame, notched and prepped for welding. That guy will sit there. And then, so that guy's gonna sit somewhere there. Right about, actually it's gonna be angled a little bit. So yeah, that's what we're gonna start from. So I'm going to weld these two things together. I'll probably just do a couple tacks so we could just make sure that it is what we need. And then we're gonna mock up the arm, put it there with the old link, and then we'll confirm fitment. If we're good, we'll fully weld that, and then we'll start building out our gussets that are pretty much gonna tie in from like here to here. And then we're gonna try to make it come to both edges of the frame, and it should look pretty cool. I have a pretty cool idea in mind. And then this is also gonna be way better than what I had before. All right guys, we're picking up back on from where we left off on the last clip. So that was Friday, it's Monday now morning. So I'm going to basically start doing the gussets for that cantilever mount that we made earlier. And then we got Justin in, and I have him working on the motor mount gussets. Justin's project for today is gonna be getting on the motor mount gussets that we got laser cut, and then he's also gonna be doing the double shear tabs for the back. And then Justin also found out today that basically the sector shaft, it's loose in there. So
the Heim itself just has no jam nut in there. It has that blade.
Yeah, so we gotta add a jam nut to that. So Justin was saying that what we could do is just cut this off, take off about a 1/2 inch off of that, bring it up, weld it back on, add the jam nut, and then we'll be good there. So, and then he was also messing around with the motor mount plates, and he noticed that pretty much this plate doesn't sit perfect because they did not weld the motor mounts perfectly even. So
we're gonna end up, being that the motor mounts are kind of off a little bit, we're gonna end up just trimming this bracket to get it kind of fit, so we can get a nice joint weld here. Kind of just a little better fitment. It's not as crazy and big as this, so it'll still give us the same effect as tying in and kind of boxing in this upper motor mount here. So it'll still give us the same rigidity that we want out of it, just a little simpler. Instead of cutting this motor mount, redoing the motor mount to make it level with the other side and then doing that. So it's kind of just taking one step out of the equation by just making a modification to the bracket, calling it a day.
Justin's gonna work on that. I'm gonna work on the suspension gussets that I have to make, and we'll check back in. So we figured out what we wanted on the truck side of this thing. So basically, figured out we wanted some sort of chipboard like this, or triangle, and we used chipboard to figure out what we're gonna do. So went ahead and got everything cut out of 1/8 inch. Took off all the mill scale, passed the DA on it so it looks nice, and then I made sure they were all even. So basically what this is gonna do, cantilever mount is gonna get 2 of these pieces that will basically, I'm trying to make like kind of like a shark fin in a sense. Basically, it's gonna go somewhere there, and there'll be 2 pieces and it'll be angled in like that. It'll make a lot more sense once it's all put together, but I'm pretty much gonna get the cantilever in there, figure out the orientation of the mount for the bushing to make sure everything lines up correctly, and then I'll get that tacked on the car, and then we'll tack these guys on. All right, so Justin's got the truck up, so I can't really put the whole cantilever thing back on the truck. So for the moment, I'm gonna help him out, but I want to show you guys what he's got going on. So he already went ahead and took off the lower control arm. So we bent these tabs up, which is gonna have the 1 inch bolt, which is gonna be going right about there. So he's getting that prepped up right now. And we did find that bolt was the wrong bolt, so we do need to get that shanked all the way correctly. So basically when that was going through here,
you can even see where it's already damaging the threads right there.
yeah, so all this was just basically, the Heim joint was sitting on this and it should be sitting on this. So we do need to get a bolt that has a way longer shank, which is probably going to be expensive, but that is the right way to do things. And then we did find out that this hole was, it's probably warped or something, which is super annoying, but it does make the bolt coming in and out a little difficult. It is what it is. But Justin's gonna go ahead and get this prepped, put the new tab on, and then we'll use the existing bolt for now just to hold it, and we'll get the new one ordered. And then after that, we'll probably get some welding done. All right, so we had gotten the cantilever up there. It's all mocked up. And then I started kind of putting these gussets together. You guys will see what this will look like probably in the next video. And you guys can see we already have this kind of mocked up. So nothing's connected now. We're currently working on it, but those gussets will go somewhere in here super nicely. You can see our bolt and the bronze bushing ended up working out really good. We still need to adjust them because they're still not perfectly at 90, but that's coming along. Justin got the motor mount gusset put in. We ended up making a change just because it made more sense for the car. And then he did weld in the bottom, and he is currently putting on the Willwood brakes.
And we packed in the bearings and took all that apart.
Yeah, so we also, when we took this apart, we noticed that the bearings weren't packed, there was no seals. So Justin went ahead and took care of that. So we'll get into that in the third video. We're gonna close this video out. I wanted to keep all the Fat Fender Garage stuff all kind of in the same video, so it made a lot of sense for watching this and keeping along. So we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching. Drop a like, comment, subscribe. It helps us out. We'll see you in the next one.